The SS Baychimo, the ghost ship that sailed itself for nearly 40 years. Her crew abandoned her, trapped in Arctic ice during a blizzard, certain she'd sink within hours. She didn't. Trappers spotted her weeks later, drifting empty and intact. Over the following decades, she was boarded, abandoned again, lost, and rediscovered more than a dozen times, sailing herself through the Arctic with nobody at the helm for almost 40 years. The SS Baychimo, a steel-hulled cargo steamer built in Sweden in 1914 and later purchased by the Hudson's Bay Company for use in fur trading operations along Canada's remote northern coastline, had completed roughly a decade of routine, unremarkable Arctic trading voyages before the specific incident that would eventually transform her into one of maritime history's most genuinely unusual, sustained mysteries. In October of 1931, the Baychimo, having completed her seasonal fur trading route along the Alaskan coast, became trapped within pack ice near the town of Barrow, a genuinely common, well-understood seasonal hazard experienced by ships operating in Arctic waters during this specific era. And her crew, after enduring several days of increasingly severe blizzard conditions while the trapped vessel remained icebound, made the reasonable, standard decision to abandon ship, establishing a temporary shelter on the nearby ice and shoreline while awaiting what they genuinely, reasonably expected would be the ship's eventual destruction. Since a vessel trapped and crushed within shifting Arctic pack ice under sustained blizzard conditions was, by any conventional maritime assessment, unlikely to survive intact. What actually happened proved genuinely, remarkably different from this reasonable expectation. Since when the blizzard eventually cleared, the crew discovered the Baychimo had vanished entirely from where she had been trapped, and, assuming she had indeed been crushed and sunk by the ice as originally anticipated, the crew proceeded to travel onward, continuing their journey without the ship, before receiving genuinely startling news several days later that local Inuit trappers had actually spotted the Baychimo, fully intact and apparently undamaged, drifting several miles from her original icebound position. A portion of the original crew subsequently traveled to relocate the ship, successfully boarding her and confirming she remained genuinely seaworthy despite the ice conditions that had originally forced her abandonment, and attempted to resume operations, though continued severe Arctic weather conditions ultimately forced a second, considerably more permanent abandonment shortly afterward, at which point the Hudson's Bay Company, faced with the genuine practical and logistical challenges of attempting to salvage a vessel trapped so remotely within Arctic conditions during the specific historical period's available technology and resources, made the formal decision to abandon further recovery efforts entirely, effectively writing the Baychimo off as a permanent loss. What happened over the following decades represents the specific, genuinely remarkable core of the Baychimo's enduring mystery, since rather than sinking or remaining permanently trapped as reasonably expected, the empty, unmanned vessel continued drifting through Arctic waters, repeatedly spotted, boarded, and briefly occupied by various trappers, explorers, and Arctic travelers who encountered her intact, apparently seaworthy hull drifting through the region over the following years, with the ship reportedly sighted and documented on numerous separate occasions throughout the 1930s, 1940s, and even into the 1950s, decades after her original 1931 abandonment, each time apparently having survived additional years of harsh Arctic conditions that would typically be expected to have destroyed a conventional, unmaintained vessel considerably sooner. The specific individuals who encountered the drifting Baychimo across these following decades generally found her interior in genuinely reasonable, if obviously deteriorating, condition given her prolonged abandonment, and several accounts describe brief periods where various parties attempted to use the vessel as a temporary shelter, or even considered more serious salvage attempts. Though the ship's genuinely remote, consistently shifting location within the vast, difficult Arctic ice environment meant no sustained, successful salvage or permanent recovery effort was ever actually completed throughout this extended period. The Baychimo's last confirmed, definitively documented sighting occurred in 1969, nearly 4 decades following her original 1931 abandonment, after which the ship's specific fate becomes considerably less clear, with no further confirmed reliable sightings subsequently documented, leading most researchers studying the case to reasonably conclude she likely finally sank sometime after this final confirmed appearance. Though the specific circumstances and exact location of her eventual actual sinking, if that is indeed what ultimately occurred, have never been definitively established or documented, meaning the Baychimo's precise final fate technically remains genuinely, formally unresolved even today. What made the Baychimo's prolonged, decades-spanning drift genuinely, historically remarkable wasn't simply the ship's demonstrated durability, surviving so many years of harsh, sustained Arctic conditions without any maintenance or crew, but the specific, genuinely unusual pattern of repeated human encounters with the vessel across such an extended period, a single ship becoming a genuinely recurring, documented presence within Arctic maritime folklore and formal historical record across nearly 4 decades, earning her the popular nickname, the Arctic Ghost Ship, among the trappers, sailors and explorers who encountered her intact, apparently self-sustaining presence, drifting through the same harsh waters that had, by any conventional maritime expectation, been expected to destroy her within days of her original 1931 abandonment. What makes the Baychimo's story endure as one of history's most genuinely unusual maritime mysteries isn't simply the ship's remarkable physical durability, notable as that durability genuinely remains given the harsh conditions she survived without any crew or maintenance, but the specific, sustained duration of her unmanned drift, a vessel that continued appearing and reappearing across the Arctic for nearly 40 years following her original abandonment, transforming a fairly conventional Arctic shipping mishap into one of maritime history's most genuinely persistent, recurring, unsolved mysteries, one whose actual final resting place, if she has indeed finally been lost beneath the ice, has never been definitively located or confirmed. If stories like this, where a ship written off as lost kept reappearing for nearly 4 decades before finally, quietly vanishing for good, are exactly what you come here for, subscribe to the grave details, because history holds more stories like this than most people will ever know.